The first time Jordan Carter realized life wasn't fair, he was 6 years old. It wasn't some big, dramatic moment, just a normal day on the playground of Westwood Elementary. The sun was high, the slide was too hot to touch, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and melted asphalt. He was playing tag with some of the other kids when Tim Brady, a boy with blonde hair and a cocky grin, shoved him to the ground. "Stay down, monkey," Tim said, laughing. Jordan didn't even know what that meant. Not yet. But he knew it wasn't good because the other kids laughed too. When he got up, his knees scraped and burning. He wanted to punch Tim in the face. But his mother's voice rang in his head. "You don't let them break you. Ever." So he dusted himself off. He swallowed the lump in his throat. And he walked away. But something changed in him that day. That was the first time he felt it. The weight. The weight of being different. The weight of having to be stronger than everyone else. That weight would only get heavier. Middle school, nowhere to run. By the time he was in 8th grade, Jordan had learned the rules. He knew when to keep his head down, when to speak up, and when to act like things didn't bother him. But no matter how much he tried to blend in, some people just wouldn't let him. There's always someone like Ryan Jacobs. Ryan was the type of kid who never got in trouble, no matter what he did. Teachers liked him. Girls liked him. And he liked making Jordan's life miserable. "Why do you even try, man?" Ryan sneered one day after gym class when Jordan was changing in the locker room. "You're never going to be one of us." Jordan ignored him. He was used to this. Ryan wasn't. He wanted a reaction. "What, you think you're going to make it out of here? Go to college? Get rich?" Ryan chuckled. "No, man. You're going to end up like your daddy." Jordan froze. His father had been gone for years. Left when he was 3. He barely even remembered his face. Ryan grinned, knowing he hit a nerve. "Yeah, that's right. You people always do." Jordan's hands curled into fists. For years, he had held it in. The whispers, the stares, the feeling of being watched, judged, underestimated. But this was too much. Before he even knew what he was doing, his fist connected with Ryan's jaw. The crack echoed through the locker room. Ryan stumbled back, eyes wide. Blood trickled from his lip. For the first time ever, Ryan Jacobs looked scared. And Jordan felt powerful. That feeling wouldn't last. Because 10 minutes later, he was sitting outside the principal's office, his mother pacing in front of him, her face tight with anger. Not at Ryan. At him. "Jordan," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "You don't get to lose control. Not you. But he. I don't care what he said." Her eyes burned into his. "You don't get that luxury." He clenched his jaw. It wasn't fair. Ryan had been bullying him for years. But Jordan was the one in trouble. Jordan was the one who had to be better. That was the day he learned the truth. Some fights? You can't win. Jordan sat in silence as his mother drove home. The air was thick with disappointment, the kind that sat in the back of your throat and made it hard to breathe, the kind that stung worse than any punch. He wanted to defend himself, to say that Ryan Jacobs had it coming. But he knew better. His mother wasn't in the mood for explanations. She finally spoke as they pulled into their apartment complex. "Get inside." Jordan followed her up the stairs to their small unit. The walls were thin, the neighbors noisy, and the ceiling in the kitchen had a leak that no one ever came to fix. As soon as the door shut, his mother turned to face him. "Do you know how hard I work to keep you out of trouble?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. Jordan looked away. "Do you have any idea what happens to black boys who get labeled as violent?" she continued. "You think that school is going to protect you? That the police will?" His jaw tightened. "You don't get second chances, Jordan." She sighed and sat down on the couch, rubbing her temples. She looked exhausted. "I know it's not fair." Her voice softened. "But fair doesn't exist for us." Jordan hated hearing that. Hated that she was right. Hated that he had to be the one to rise above, while Ryan Jacobs got to walk away without a scratch on his record. But it didn't matter how he felt. This was the world he lived in. The shift. The next day at school, Jordan wasn't suspended. His mother had fought too hard for that. But he was given detention for a week. Ryan? He got off with nothing but a smug smile. Jordan didn't react. Not this time. He just took his punishment and kept his head down. But something changed. People noticed him now. Some kids gave him a little more space in the hallways. Others watched him with curiosity, like they were seeing him for the first time. And then there was Marcus King. Marcus was a junior, 2 years older, 6 feet tall, and built like he lifted cars for fun. He ran with a group of kids that even the teachers seemed afraid of. He caught Jordan outside after school, leaning against the bike racks with a lazy grin. "I heard what you did to Ryan," Marcus said. Jordan tensed but didn't say anything. Marcus chuckled. "Relax, man. I ain't mad at you." He studied Jordan for a moment, then nodded to his crew. "Come roll with us." Jordan hesitated. Marcus and his friends weren't just kids who got into fights. They had a reputation. Suspensions. Police run-ins. Stories that no one could confirm, but everyone believed. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "You don't get second chances." But another voice whispered something else. "You don't have to be alone." For years, Jordan had been fighting battles on his own, always taking the high road, always being the bigger person. And where had it gotten him? He looked at Marcus. Then, for the first time in his life, he stepped off the high road. Jordan walked with Marcus and his crew that afternoon. He wasn't sure why he said yes. Maybe it was the way Marcus carried himself, confident, untouchable. Maybe it was the way people looked at them as they walked by, moving out of the way like they knew better than to get too close. Or maybe, deep down, he was just tired. Tired of being the kid who swallowed his anger. Tired of being the one who had to be better. So he followed them. At first, it was simple. Just hanging out, walking home together, cracking jokes. But Jordan wasn't stupid. He knew what these guys were about. He had heard the stories, how they handled problems, how they made money, how they moved. And slowly, they started testing him. One day, Marcus handed him a pack of gum at the corner store. Jordan took it, not thinking much of it. Then Marcus smirked. "Now walk out." Jordan froze. "Come on, man. Just walk." Marcus's voice was calm, casual. Jordan glanced at the cashier, then back at Marcus. His heart pounded. He thought about putting the gum back. Then he thought about Ryan Jacobs, laughing in his face. So he walked. No one stopped him. The next day, it was a bag of chips. The day after that, a t-shirt from the mall. Each step was easier than the last. The first real test. One Friday night, Marcus called him up. "Come meet us at the park." Jordan hesitated. His mother was already asleep, exhausted from working overtime all week. He should have stayed home, but something inside him didn't want to say no. By the time he got to the park, Marcus and the others were already there, standing around someone Jordan didn't recognize. A sophomore named Dre Parker. Dre looked nervous. He kept glancing around like he wanted to run. Marcus had his arm around Dre's shoulder, smiling. "Dre here owes me money. Ain't that right?" Dre swallowed hard. "I told you, I'll get it next week, man." Marcus nodded. "See, the thing is, I don't like waiting. And I don't like excuses." Jordan's stomach twisted. Something about this felt different. Marcus turned to him. "Yo, Jordan, handle that." Jordan blinked. "What?" Marcus tossed him a pair of brass knuckles. "Handle it." Everything went quiet. Jordan felt the weight of all their eyes on him. This was it, the moment that would decide who he really was. His fingers tightened around the brass knuckles. His mind flashed back to Ryan Jacobs, to every time he had been pushed down, laughed at, made to feel small. This was his chance to show the world he wasn't weak. But then another memory came back. His mother's voice. "You don't get second chances." His heart pounded. Marcus tilted his head. "What's the problem?" Jordan's hand shook. And then he dropped the brass knuckles. The metal clattered against the pavement. The silence was deafening. Marcus stared at him. Then he chuckled. "You ain't built for this, huh?" Jordan didn't answer. Because for the first time in weeks, he finally knew who he wasn't. Marcus sighed, shaking his head. "Get out of here, man." Jordan turned and walked away. He expected them to call him back, to say it was a joke, to tell him he passed some kind of test. But no one said a word. And when he looked back, he saw it in their faces. He was done. Jordan walked away from the park that night, But the weight of what had almost happened followed him home. For weeks, he had let himself believe he could be something he wasn't. That being feared was the same as being respected. That running with Marcus and his crew would somehow erase the years of being pushed around, looked down on, and underestimated. But none of it had made him feel stronger. As he stepped into his apartment, his mother was still asleep. She didn't know where he had been. Didn't know how close he had come to making a choice that could have ruined everything. He stood in the doorway of her room for a long time, listening to her steady breathing. You don't get second chances. She was right. And now he had to deal with the fallout. No way out. By Monday, word had spread. Jordan wasn't stupid. He knew how things worked. You didn't just walk away from Marcus King without consequences. Sure enough, in the hallways, people looked at him differently. Some whispered, others just stared. Then came the first sign of trouble. When he got to his locker, it was wide open. His books were gone. His notebooks were ripped up, their pages scattered on the floor. A warning. The second sign came after school. Jordan was walking home when he felt it, that heavy feeling in his chest, like he was being watched. He turned the corner, and there they were. Marcus, Ryan Jacobs, and 3 others from the crew. Waiting. Jordan stopped. He could turn around, try to run, but what was the point? This had been coming from the moment he dropped those brass knuckles. Marcus smirked. Thought you could walk away, huh? Jordan's fist clenched. Ryan stepped forward. Nah, man. You don't just walk away from us. You need to be taught a lesson. Jordan knew what was about to happen. He had 2 choices, fight or take the beating. If he fought, it wouldn't matter if he won or lost. They'd keep coming. If he took the beating, they'd see him as weak. Either way, he lost. Marcus cracked his knuckles. Make it easy on yourself, Carter. Jordan exhaled. Then, before anyone could react, he swung first. His fist smashed into Ryan's nose, sending him stumbling back with a yell. Blood splattered on the pavement. For 1 second, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then they all rushed him. 5 against 1. Jordan fought like hell, but the numbers were too much. A fist to the ribs, a kick to the leg, a punch to the jaw that made his head snap back. He hit the ground, pain exploding in his side. Someone's boot connected with his stomach, knocking the wind out of him. He curled up, arms over his head, trying to block the worst of it. It felt like forever. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. Hey, get off him. The blows stopped. Jordan barely registered the sound of footsteps running away. A shadow moved over him. Mr. Reynolds, the school security officer. Kid, can you hear me? Jordan blinked up at him, vision blurred, head pounding. Then everything faded to black. Waking up, he woke up in a hospital bed. His mother was sitting beside him, eyes red from crying. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she reached over and took his hand. I almost lost you. Jordan swallowed hard. She wasn't just talking about the fight. She was talking about everything. The choices he had made, the path he had almost gone down. And he finally saw it, the fear in her eyes. The fear of a mother who knew that one wrong step could mean losing her son forever. Jordan's throat tightened. He had spent so much time trying to prove something, trying to be something. But in the end, all he had proven was that his mother was right. There are some fights you can't win, but there are also some fights you don't have to fight at all.